Give it a chance, and Tesla's Model S will forever change the way you view electric cars. In fact, it may well change the way you think about cars of any kind. Put simply, it seems to offer us a glimpse of a better way. A means of luxurious automotive mobility that does away with engine noise and vibration. One that instantly makes the whole idea of lugging around a barrel of fossil fuel to burn seem quaint and outdated. Full electric cars have long promised these things, but then made themselves untenable with high pricing and restrictive driving ranges. In contrast, a Model S costs no more than its full luxury segment rivals, and crucially, thanks to its larger battery, can travel 3 or 4 times further than any ordinary electric vehicle between charges. Better still, all of this comes packaged up with a range of smart technologies that could only have come from a company with a clean sheet approach to personal transportation. This car is, in short, a breath of fresh air, in every sense.
If you're a luxury segment buyer, I expect you haven't thought much about electric cars. You probably think of them as being based on small, cheap runabouts with restricted batteries that'll dump you by the roadside after 50 or 60 miles. It's time, though, for a change of heart. Time, perhaps, for this car, the Tesla Model S. It's got performance, size, and yes, range. All the things that convention says you can't have in an all-electric car. So it can be as quick as a Ferrari, as luxurious as a Mercedes, and as eco-friendly as a Nissan Leaf. All for no more money than you'd pay for a well-specified, conventionally engined large luxury car. Interested yet? It all explains why Tesla is the world's most talked about and fastest growing automotive brand, outselling all of its luxury competitors in the US to the point where in Silicon Valley there's hardly a CEO without a Model S in his immaculately paved driveway. There's every chance that top European executives may follow suit too, unless rivals get their act together and properly challenge what is probably the most important car America has brought us since Henry Ford's original Model T. In this film, we're going to look at, in detail, just why this Tesla is so significant. Offered typically with up to 300 miles of driving range, it more than trebles the distance that until now full EV vehicles have been able to travel between charges. Yet does so with a turn of speed that will embarrass all but the fastest petrol super saloons, while operating in a level of silence that'll make a Rolls-Royce seem hopelessly unrefined. This is, in short, a car that thinks way beyond the box. So does Elon Musk, Tesla brand creator and co-founder of a PayPal organization that's given him such reserves of operating capital that he could afford to spend as much as was necessary to create a sustainable automotive future right here, right now. If you think you've seen everything in automotive terms, well, you haven't. Not until you've tried a Model S anyway, and that's just what we're going to do. If you set about reimagining the future of the motor car, you probably wouldn't expect the result to look as conventional as this. A certain amount of convention, though, is important to buyers in the luxury saloon segment, even those brave enough to commit to fresh technology and an unknown brand. So is attention to detail, and there's plenty of that here. Something you begin to realise as you approach to get in and these motorised door handles glide out to greet you. Take a seat inside and, well, it's not really like anything you'll have tried before. The cabin's dominated by this enormous colour touchscreen that sits in the middle of the fascia and can be used to control everything from the selectable height of the air suspension to the workings of the climate control system. Now, much else is different too, with almost everything you expect a luxury vehicle to deliver having either been changed or become configurable. So there's no start button and certainly no ignition slot. There's no handbrake either. These things aren't necessary, for the Tesla knows the key is on board, poising itself for the gradient you're on and readying itself for progress. Pull the column-mounted transmission lever down into drive and the car obediently creeps forward as an ordinary automatic would do, but only because it's been programmed to meet expectations that it should do so. Those prepared to think differently can set the car up to sit stationary until throttle is applied. It's ready for action now, but of course, in true all-electric style, there's complete silence. The calm before the storm. And what a storm! The throttle pedal requires quite a flex from your right foot, but brush your brogues against it with any kind of purpose, and this thing hurls itself forward with acceleration that's, well, electric. But than you'd expect it to be. In a combustion engine, the pulling power would, after all, have to build. Here, everything's there right from the get-go. And in the case of the standard 85 kWh Model S variant I'm driving here, everything means a prodigious 600 Newton meters of torque from the 380 brake horsepower electric motor, enough to fire you up the road even more quickly than the 0 to 60 sprint time of 5.4 seconds would suggest. Even that, though, is more than enough to make this car significantly quicker than the fastest luxury segment diesel models it theoretically competes with. Which brings me neatly to the next model up in the range, the Model S85D. Here, the D in question doesn't stand for a smoky oil burner, but instead designates the addition of the dual motor option, Tesla's way of describing four-wheel drive. The all-wheel drive dual motor setup, to give this system its full name, changes this car's mechanical configuration. So you move from the simple layout of the variant I'm driving here, that of having a single 380 brake horsepower electric motor slung out over the rear axle, driving the back wheels, to one that, as the terminology suggests, offers two electric motors, one sitting on the front axle, the other driving from the rear. Both of these develop 188 brake horsepower, so in total you've got approximately the same sort of power as you would in an ordinary Model S85 variant, but with the power spread around the drivetrain, you've of course got the perfect recipe for all-wheel drive traction. Tesla went to a lot of trouble to make the dual motor drive system work, and it wasn't just so that Model S85 buyers could tick an extra box and get an all-wheel drive option. As ever, company creator Elon Musk had bigger dreams, namely in the creation of the world's fastest accelerating four-door. Having owned a McLaren F1 supercar, he thought it'd be fun to see what an equally fast flagship version of this Model S would be like. A car Tesla badges the P85D. The answer is insane, a word I have to use because it designates the most frantic of the top Tesla's three driving modes, the others being normal and sport. Go insane and 60 miles per hour is just 3.2 seconds away from rest, courtesy of a 221 brake horsepower electric motor driving the front wheels and a 470 brake horsepower unit powering those at the back. As advertised, there's nothing else with 4 or 5 seats that can get remotely close to this kind of pace. At this point, I know what you're probably thinking. The fastest you can go in an all-electric car, the shorter the overall distance it will take you. More electric motors will mean more weight, particularly if they're bigger and more powerful, and that in turn would mean more energy consumption and a reduction in operating range. Sounds logical, doesn't it? But when it comes to Tesla's engineering, a different kind of logic applies. Yes, their experts will tell you the dual motor system is heavier, but it's cleverer too. It's two drive units programmed to constantly shift power from front to rear to keep each motor in its power and efficiency sweet spot. In fact, so effective is this process that the normal penalty for the extra weight, the potential reduction you'd expect in operating range, is easily overcome. So also are some of the inevitable compromises of the ordinary single motor rear wheel drive system. I'll give you an example. Due to the rotating speed limits of a single fixed gear motor, the Tesla engineers had to choose between class-leading acceleration or class-leading top speed for the ordinary rear-driven Model S85 variant that I'm driving here. That's why it only does 130 miles per hour flat out, a figure well down on what you'd get in a rival diesel-powered luxury saloon, and a factor which may hurt sales in key markets like Germany, where the ability to cruise at over 130 miles per hour on the Autobahn is de rigueur. In the all-wheel drive dual-motor Model S85D and P85D variants, there's no longer any need for that sort of compromise. In these models, one motor can be geared for quick acceleration, while the other can be better tuned for efficient high-speed cruising. Hence, the increase in top speed to 155 miles per hour for both of those versions. I mentioned operating range earlier. Now you'll be wanting to know about that. We were, after all, used to fully charged pure EV models struggling to deliver a real-world range of much more than about 70 miles. Restrictions of this kind are the main reason why people don't like electric vehicles. Here again, though, normal rules simply don't apply. Primarily because, in this case, you're working with a much bigger battery. One nearly 4 times more powerful than that, say, in a Nissan Leaf. And as a result, a Model S with an 85 kWh battery is rated as being able to complete 310 miles on the official NEDC test cycle. Even in real-world driving, you could expect a 250-mile range, which is astonishing for a pure electric car. After all, a powerful petrol-powered luxury saloon probably wouldn't go much further than that if you drove it reasonably hard between fill-ups. True, if you go for the 60 kilowatt per hour battery of this entry-level Model S60 variant, that figure would fall, probably to less than 200 miles in ordinary use. But that's still very impressive, especially given that charging is so relatively quick. Nearly all owners will get the powerful plug-in benefits of fitting a wall box in their garage, which will enable even a battery this large to charge overnight. And out and about, if they've ticked the optional box that'll give their Model S a pair of twin onboard chargers, and they find a public Type 2 AC charging point, the longest they'll wait to replenish the battery from empty is 4 hours and 23 minutes. And those fortunate enough to travel close to a more powerful public DC CHAdeMO charging point will find that the process can be quicker still. CHAdeMO, by the way, is a global charging association that gets its name from an abbreviation of Charge de Move, or Charge on the Move. Charge that really does get you moving is delivered by the potent 120-watt Tesla supercharging points, capable of delivering a 50% charge in just 20 minutes. With a growing network of these, it won't be long before long road trips will be easily facilitated to all major cities. So I've explained the basics of ownership and design, and you've got the idea about this Model S being quick off the mark. But what's it like to drive day to day? Well, there's certainly a degree of adjustment needed. In a normal car, the internal combustion engine clues you into when your speed's about to rise. You hear the revs rising, the body vibrates in anticipation, and you can prepare yourself mentally for the acceleration that follows. The Tesla doesn't do anything like that. It sits there silently, and then, with no warning, you're catapulted forwards. To the uninitiated, it'll be genuinely shocking. The car just gathers speeds as if it's been fired from a catapult. The noises are alien too. There's no rise and fall of the engine to sync with gear changes. Instead, just the sound of tires and wind growing increasingly louder. Get used to that, and the next thing that you'll have to learn is what Tesla calls the technique of one-pedal driving. Lift off the accelerator pedal, and so powerful is the regenerative braking system that the car slows abruptly. So much so, in fact, its brake lights have been programmed to flash to warn following motorists. You can adjust this by fiddling with the various settings, but only by so much. It's really a fundamental part of the way that the Model S harvests its power and achieves that phenomenal operating range. What all this means is that you only really need the conventional friction brakes for very sharp stops. Sometimes you'll find yourself completing a whole journey hardly ever using them. So much for going and then stopping, but what about cornering? Now this car does, after all, tip the scales at well over 2 tons. On the plus side though, those heavy batteries are centrally mounted beneath the floor, giving this Model S a lower centre of gravity than almost any other series production car. Now that, along with a very stiff body shell, does to some extent keep body roll in check. But if you start to fling the thing about, you soon realise that Tesla still has a bit to learn when it comes to the age-old exercise of chassis tuning. Now, there's not much feedback from the wheel either. Whichever of the 3 steering settings, comfort, sport or standard, that you end up selecting. Still, few potential buyers will prioritise a dynamic drive. For these people, luxury and refinement will be greater draws, and they'll love the magic carpet ride delivered by an optional air suspension system, which is also able to adjust the ride height through either manual or automatic means. Now, the automatic side is taken care of by communication with the sat-nav, so when the car knows it's on a highway, it'll lower itself to reduce drag. But you might want to intervene too, say if you're visiting someone with a steep driveway. Now, in this situation, you can raise the ride height to suit. Better still, the car will remember the adjustment you've made and log its GPS location, so that if you ever return to the same driveway, the ride height will automatically be raised once more as you approach. Anything else? Well, how about this? Every Model S that rolls off the production line can be future-proofed with the optional tech package with autopilot system that almost all owners specify. On delivery, this will include a whole suite of clever driving aids, but the really neat thing is that Tesla doesn't stop there, adding and enabling extra features progressively over time with software updates. Now, to give you an example, just before this test, the update added traffic-aware cruise control, a forward collision warning system, and auto headlights that dip themselves at night. Now, it all means that a different kind of ownership experience is possible, whereas virtually every other car is at its most capable when it rolls out of the dealership, then gradually deteriorates as you own it. Your Model S will constantly be downloading periodic updates to make itself smarter, faster, and more economical. That's yet another amazing thing about it, and there are plenty of others. We love, for example, the sheer connectedness of this car. To take just one example, if you sync your Model S with your online calendar, it'll check current traffic conditions to determine how much time is needed to make your first meeting of the day. In the morning, it can turn on its climate control system in readiness for you, and even open your garage door before you stroll in. But that's just the start. In the future, it seems there will be almost no end to the things this car could be programmed to do. Apparently, Tesla has equipped it with so many cameras, sonars, and radar sensors with real-time traffic updates that, in theory, it could be set up to almost completely drive and park itself. And on private property, it'll even be able to pull itself out of its garage and meet you at the curb. How about that for a showstopper? In other words, you get the point. This is, in every sense, a game changer. Compared to a Model S, everything else in the class just seems ancient and lazy. If you're of the opinion that futuristic technology should come in futuristic packaging, then you might find the styling of this Model S to be surprisingly conventional. It's certainly the kind of look that a buyer in the luxury segment would be used to, but only because Tesla has wisely chosen to follow customer expectations in making it so. It's handsome though, the exterior shaping the work of ex-Mazda designer Franz von Holzhausen, who previously worked on the new Beetle and the Pontiac Salsa sports car. It's hard to see those influences here, but there are certainly plenty of others. From different angles, you might be reminded of anything from an Aston Martin Rapide or a Jaguar XJ to an Audi Q7. What matters is that, as a total package, there's probably something to please almost everyone. I talked about designing to customer expectations. Now, a good example is this front grille. Since there's no internal combustion engine to cool, there's no real need for it. And indeed, if you look closely, these slats are actually blanked off. A Model S, though, must have such a thing to fit right in alongside more conventional rivals outside boardrooms, golf clubs and smart hotels. And, as on any ordinary luxury saloon, you'll find other classy touches. Take these big, powerful-looking alloy wheels. Then there are the high-tech xenon or full LED headlamps. Oh, and these lovely chrome door handles that spring out to meet you as you approach the car. An unnecessary draw on the battery? Not really, because the handles retract to a position completely flush with the bodywork. The power they draw is more than compensated for by the reduction in drag they provide. I told you this thing was clever. Move round to the side and you begin to appreciate just how sizable this Model S really is. Though the wheelbase is a fraction shorter than something like a BMW 5 Series, the front and rear overhangs are longer, giving a total length of nearly 5 metres. And that's much closer to the kind of BMW 7 Series or Audi A8 that sits in the next segment up. Now that bulk's well disguised though, particularly in the way that the bodywork flows over the front wheel arches and forms these shoulders that run to the rear haunches. It's sleek too. Were you to look beneath this car, you'd find the surface of the underside to be completely smooth, with no exhaust pipe, prop shaft or bulky differentials to spoil the airflow. And that's the main reason for the industry-leadingly slippery drag coefficient of just 0.24. The lift-back rear end is neatly styled too, with complex light units wrapping around this chrome detail strip above a lower section that looks particularly clean. It takes a moment to realise why that is. Oh yes, no exhaust pipes. And scan the bodywork and of course you'll find it bereft of a fuel filler cap too. Instead, a hidden charging flap is concealed on the side of the left-hand taillight. Approach with the charging connector and it springs open. Drop inside and the surprises keep on coming throughout a beautifully trimmed interior in which the designers have clearly felt free to be a little more futuristic. There's uncluttered full-width floor space and no handbrake, nor is there any visible means of starting the car. With this Model S having sensed the presence of this little car-shaped key in your pocket, you simply pull the auto gear selector stalk behind the steering wheel down into drive to move forward. Now this stalk is Mercedes derived, as nearly all the switchgear is. The German manufacturer used to own 10% of Tesla motors, and the Americans will surely have learned from the Stuttgart maker when in future it comes to improving some of the lower grade plastics that closer inspection reveals in some parts of the cabin. Look around the dash and you'll spot only a couple of buttons, one for the glove box and the other for the hazard flashers. Otherwise, just about everything is controlled by this huge 17-inch colour touchscreen that dominates the fascia. It's just as well then that the interface it offers is brilliant, dealing effectively with everything from the air conditioning controls to stereo functions and the various settings for things like the car's suspension and the regenerative braking modes. You can even use the touchscreen to operate the sunroof. I love the music system too, designed to function with a Spotify-style online music library that can locate any track or artist you care to name. Forget about carrying around CDs. Not that you could, as rather annoyingly for someone like me, who has some rather unique ones, there's actually no CD player. You can of course also stream music via Bluetooth or USB. Primarily though, you'll probably mostly be leaving this middle screen in its navigation display mode, in which form it really is clever. Thanks to a 3G Google Maps connection, it can show you traffic build-up points and Google Earth images. Plus, of course, it's the point from which you'll be planning your journeys, with displays predicting the percentage of battery charge that'll remain at your required destination and the amount you'll be left with upon returning home. The predictions will vary as you progress, of course, with traffic conditions and driving style, but there are few excuses for not meeting the targets set thanks to energy usage screens that will help show your driving efficiency in real time. Now, as I mentioned, all of this depends on a 3G connection or an enabled Wi-Fi link if you happen to be in range of such a thing. Now, if you're out and about and you lose your 3G signal, there's always the backup of a less detailed but always reliable hard disk enabled sat-nav system that displays in the instrument cluster. In fact, almost everything you can access on this center dash screen can also be duplicated on the instrument cluster display once you get conversant with the buttons on the multifunction steering wheel. There's no real grounds then for claiming this center display to be a distraction, though many lazy journalists who couldn't be bothered to read the handbook have suggested that. What might be slightly distracting is the main speedometer display. The blue band that rises or lowers with your speed is fine, but the readout to the right of the dial, which alternates between orange or green depending on whether you're using charge or regenerating it, can be a little irritating on first acquaintance. What else? Well, as a driver, you're sat fairly high up, but there's no excuse for not being comfortable, thanks to a clever driver profile setup system that allows you to adjust seat, steering and side mirror positions under your own name in the top left of the display. Now, when you jump in and hit the button, everything's restored to your preferred position within seconds. Apart from the rear view mirror, is that something that's beyond the wit of Tesla to control? Now, somewhat bizarrely, there's also no adjustment for seatbelt height either. The brand's design team might also want to look at cabin storage space while they're about it. There isn't that much of it, not helped by the rather curious absence of the usual door pockets you'd expect. What's that about? As for rear seat accommodation, well, the standard of head and legroom on offer are unremarkable for a car in this class. But what is impressive is this car's ability to comfortably look after 3 fully sized adults in a way that no other rival in this class can. The lack of the usual centrally placed rear transmission tunnel helps in this, as does the shaping of a rear bench that's properly formed for a middle occupant, rather than confining them to a perch on an uncomfortably raised cushion. And as for cargo space, well, there's plenty of it. The lack of an engine means that the pointy end gets what Tesla calls a frunk, American for front trunk, you see. Flip the bonnet and there's 150 litres on offer, or at least there is in this rear-wheel drive model. Go for the all-wheel drive dual-motor version, and this space behind the cargo net is taken care of by the front-mounted motor. The four-wheel drive drivetrain requires a slight compromise in rear boot space too, but it's not hugely significant, and in any case, there's plenty of room to play with. This rear-driven version offers 744 litres, which is about 50% more than you'd get in a rival Mercedes S-Class, or even something like a Volvo V70 Estate with all the seats in use. There's so much space, in fact, that you might be tempted to fill it with the pair of occasional use rearward-facing child seats that Tesla offers as an option, neatly folding out from the boot floor when specified. Now, fold forward the 60-40 split folding rear bench, and there's 1,645 litres of space to play with. So, how much will you pay for this taste of your motoring future? Less than you might think? Possibly. The entry-level Model S60 variant will, after all, set you back no more than about £50,000, much the same as you'd pay for a more conventional hybrid engine version of a slightly smaller executive car like BMW's 5 Series or the Mercedes E-Class. The feebler 60 kWh battery in a Model S60, though, takes around 25% from your driving range, diluting the groundbreakingly long-distance EV flexibility that probably attracted you to this car in the first place. Which means that you'll probably want the larger 85 kWh battery fitted to the Model S85 variants. The standard rear-wheel drive 85 version requires a £60,000 budget, which still seems reasonable. Most buyers, though, opt to add a premium of just over £4,000 to that figure to get the 85D version. The D designating the clever dual-motor all-wheel drive system that then comes included. You can go further too. Top of the range, priced from around £80,000, is the Model S P85D, one of the fastest and most unique cars in the world. The P designates performance, and you certainly get it. The 85 kWh battery here mated with an electric motor offering almost twice as much grunt, 691 brake horsepower, and enough pulling power to ensure that the standard dual-motor all-wheel drive system will have its work cut out in transmitting the torque to the tarmac. All the prices I've just quoted you, by the way, are figures with the government's generous £5,000 electric car grant already subtracted from the asking cost. Bear in mind, too, the way that you'll be buying this car. Now, there are a small handful of so-called Tesla store dealerships in this country placed close to centres of population. Now, if you log on to teslamotors.com, select the British version of the website and find that you're not close to one, then simply sign up for one of the regular test drive events that regularly take place in other regions of the country. Now, once you've had some seat time, you can then finalise your requirements with the appropriate Tesla store, or simply specify and order your car online. On to the value proposition this brand's pricing represents. Many potential customers and industry observers have expressed surprise that a car so fast, luxurious and technologically advanced can be so relatively affordable. As this Tesla neared the end of its development, the expectation was, after all, that it would sell in the £80,000 to £100,000 bracket. The thing is, though, that it very often does, for the tendency with many buyers is to get quite enthusiastic with the options list. It is, to be fair, pretty hard not to spend a fair amount on extras with this car. For a start, only the executive basics come included in the standard package. Things like alloy wheels of at least 19 inches in size, xenon headlamps with LED daytime running lights, auto headlamps and wipers, parking sensors, keyless entry, cruise control, a rear view camera, Bluetooth phone compatibility and electric seats. Now, if you're a typical buyer in this segment, then you'll probably want more than this, in which case we need to give you a starting point. Now, it would certainly be strange to order one without some of the key extra cost features that alone will together probably add around £5,000 to the asking price figure. Let's begin with the preparatory stuff that the majority of first-time buyers will need in adjusting their lifestyle to full EV motoring. For a start, you can't continually charge the car up from an ordinary 3-pin plug. It takes too long. So assuming you've got a garage, you'll need to get yourself a wall box fitted, and that will cost you around £100. Now think about charging the battery when you're out and about. At one extreme, you might be visiting Granny and finding her only able to offer you that ordinary 3-pin plug. At the other, you might come across one of the super quick CHAdeMO DC charging points that are springing up around the country. Now, in both cases, you need to have paid Tesla for an extra cost attachment in order to plug in. Now, this car has also been equipped with special optional attachments for the unique 3- and 5-pin plugs that you might find at certain garages, farms or places like caravan parks. The only charging implement that you do get in the standard price is this Type 2 lead for AC charging points. And even this really isn't enough, for the car will replenish its cells far more quickly if a second onboard charger has been built into its standard mechanical spec. Now, that'll cost you another £1,250. Go for the entry-level Model S60 variant and you'll also have to pay more to get the vehicle enabled to use Tesla's 120 kilowatt supercharging stations too. Although all the Model S85 variants get that feature included as standard. The American brand says that it makes so much of this stuff optional because different owners will want to charge in different ways and will have different kinds of charging points available to them. Our perspective here is different. We'd want to have a full toolkit of charging options available to us as an integral part of the ownership. And the way that Tesla's ordering system is structured at present, that means ticking a lot of boxes. This means that as a potential owner, you'll need to do a bit of homework. Though it's worth remembering that you can always order items after delivery if you subsequently find that you need them. With these basics sorted, the other key feature this car absolutely has to have is the tech package with autopilot system. Now, it's there to continually update your Model S with regular software updates throughout its life, and we can't really see the point of Tesla ownership without it. Keep up with these and you'll be getting into this car one morning and finding it able to do something that it couldn't do yesterday, which for us is one of the coolest things about it. Now, this package also includes the onboard maps that you'll need for the navigation system, together with free updates for 7 years. Now, along with features that you'll want from a car of this kind, like an electronically operated tailgate, power folding electromatic mirrors, automatic LED cornering lights that dip themselves at night, a radar-controlled adaptive cruise control setup that keeps you a safe distance from the car in front on the highway. Now, plus the various electronic safety systems that I'll come to in just a minute. So, once you've selected your Tesla variant and added these crucial extras to it, what else might you want to specify? Well, on a car this expensive, we'd want Tesla's security package, which adds a motion-activated intrusion alarm backed by an independent battery. At this level, you're probably also going to want the leather trim that comes as part of the £2,000 premium interior package. Napa hide included on the seats and the lower dashboard, along with LED accent lighting. Now, most owners also tick the box for the smart air suspension system that really completes the luxurious driving dynamics of this car, communicating as it does with the sat-nav and constantly adjusting the ride to suit the road surface and your cargo weight. As a family man, I'd also want to find another couple of thousand or so for the third row boot-mounted rear-facing seats. In other words, if you pick out your chosen Tesla Model S variant, then add an extra £10,000 to the asking price, you shouldn't be far off the final figure that in reality you'll actually be paying. Or at least it will be the final figure, provided you can resist the temptation to upgrade to the real niceties. So what are they? Well, if you specify the leather trim, you could also go for the executive rear seats package that gives you two individual executive rear chairs that are separated by a wide center console. Ideal if you're going to be chauffeured. Now, included in this deal is the Sub-Zero weather package that can also be ordered separately. This gives you rear seat heating plus a heated steering wheel and defrosting for the wiper blades and the washer nozzles. In terms of other extra cost features, I'd also want to look at the panoramic roof, and I'd certainly be tempted by the 12-speaker ultra high fidelity sound package. Now, this car also has extra cost red paint, and were I its owner, I could also have chosen to pay extra for Obesh wood trim and a white Alcantara headliner. Go for the top P85D flagship model, and you can also finish the car off with red brake calipers and a carbon fibre spoiler. So how does the overall proposition here compare to that offered by rivals? Assuming, that is, that you can consider anything else in the luxury saloon segment as being directly comparable to this car. There are, after all, no other all-electric cars of this kind, the closest alternatives being plug-in petrol-electric hybrid versions of the Porsche Panamera and the Mercedes S-Class. Both of these will cost you the same amount as a very well-specified Model S85 and offer the flexibility that, of course, you don't get here of being able to switch to conventional fossil fuel when their battery charge runs out. Now, the problem is that that will be happening quite frequently, given a real-world electric-only operating range that, in both these cases, is no more than about 15 miles. It's another world, really. Otherwise, the only alternatives are the diesel-engined Audi A8, BMW 7 Series, Mercedes S-Class or Jaguar XJ luxury saloons that you might have started off looking at in this segment before realising that for much the same sort of money, you could afford one of these. Small wonder that this Model S outsells all of these cars in its home US market. In other countries, helped by generous tax breaks, it does even better. It's actually the best-selling luxury vehicle of any kind in Norway, for instance. Finally, a word about the scintillatingly fast flagship Model S P85D performance version. Even with the spec you'll want on it, you'll find it'll undercut the fastest versions of conventionally engined petrol-powered luxury contenders. Cars like Audi's RS7 at about £85,000, Jaguar's XJ Supersport at around £95,000, and Porsche's Panamera Turbo at nearly £110,000. None of which, by the way, can keep up with a P85D. Finally, a word on safety. The Model S was designed from the ground up to be the safest car on the road, as proven by a 5-star rating in all categories of both the Euro NCAP and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration NHTSA crash tests. Much of its prowess in this area is owed to the placement of the electric drivetrain that sits beneath the car's aluminium occupant cell in its own subframe. Now, this positioning minimises rollover risk and replaces a typically heavy engine block with impact-absorbing boron steel rails. It also gives this Tesla an astonishingly low centre of gravity and makes it almost impossible to roll over. The NHTSA tried to do that in tests and broke their testing rig while trying to flip the car over with a 4G impact that would have seen some other rival models barrel rolling. It effectively withstands side impacts too, thanks to aluminium pillars reinforced with steel rails to reduce intrusion, protecting occupants and the battery pack while improving roof stiffness. Now, the NHTSA tried to evaluate this with a side impact test they thought would be absolutely punishing. After the dust settled, the internal volume of the car was measured against pre-impact results, and the Model S was found to have retained an astonishing 63.5% of its driver residual space. In a Volvo, put through the same test, that figure was just 7.8%. Anything that can make a Volvo seem a bit feeble has to be something special. Of course, no car is infallible, so as you'd expect, this one offers the kind of complete protection you'd require at this price point, with no fewer than 8 airbags, with twin front, side, curtain and knee bags included. Plus, it's good to know that should you have a crash, the battery system will automatically disconnect the main power source. And as you demand for this kind of money, all versions of the Model S also come with the usual electronic aids for braking, traction and stability control, plus a whole series of high-tech safety systems also come included. Now, these include a lane departure warning system to stop dozy drivers veering out of their lanes on the highway, and a speed limit warning setup that pictures speed limit signs as you pass them and then display them on the dash. Now, you also get a forward collision warning system that constantly scans the road ahead for potential collision hazards. Now, if one is detected, you'll be warned, and if you don't respond or aren't able to, the car will automatically apply the brakes to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. Expect other clever electronic features to be automatically added to the software of the autopilot system during your period of ownership. On to the cost of ownership. Now here, as you'd expect, this Model S enjoys a devastating advantage over its rivals. Time to look at the facts. Let's say you were considering what will probably be the most popular Model S variant, the 85D version with its dual motor all-wheel drive system. Now, for the same sort of size, specification, space, traction and performance in a conventional luxury saloon, you'd have to look at something like a petrol-powered Audi S8, a car that up front would cost you almost exactly the same sort of money. From that point on, though, the running costs will be widely divergent. You'd get a range of not much more than around 300 miles from the Audi if you were driving it reasonably hard, which is also what you'd get from a fully charged Model S85. But whereas that range will require a £100 fill-up in the S8, you'll spend no more than around £5 or so to fully charge this Tesla from empty. Now, to save you doing the maths, I'll tell you that over 20,000 miles, that'll mean total fueling costs that in the Audi would set you back over £6,000 more. On top of that, you'll need to remember that a Model S attracts very little benefit in kind company car tax. Something like an S8 could set a typical 40% taxpayer back around £11,000 in BIK bills alone. All of this means that if you cover high mileage in the course of your work and are considering this Tesla as an alternative to one of the faster petrol-powered full luxury segment models, say an AMG-engineered Mercedes CLS or S-Class, a BMW M6 Grand Coupe, a Porsche Panamera Turbo, or even an Aston Martin Rapide or lower-end Bentley, then it's not inconceivable that owning a Model S could save you over £20,000 a year. At the same time, you'd be driving something that'd be quieter, more technologically advanced, and probably faster in the real world. Even if money's not an issue for you, it's obvious how attractive a proposition like that might be. Crunch the balance sheet numbers, taking everything into account, not just fuel and tax, but residuals, servicing, the lot. And this Tesla looks equally attractive. Over 3 years and 30,000 miles, the Aston Rapide I mentioned would cost a whopping 372 pence per mile to run. Even the slightly less exotic Mercedes CLS 63 AMG rates at 214 pence per mile. In contrast, this Model S85 would cost you just 106 pence per mile. Now, to give you some perspective, that's on a par with something like a little BMW 335i. Go for the entry-level Model S60 variant and the figure falls to 97 pence per mile, which is closer to what an up-spec Ford Mondeo would cost on a day-to-day basis. Think about that for a moment. You could run a Model S for what you'd otherwise fork out running a Mondeo. So let's say you're convinced by the Tesla proposition. How would the whole charging process work? Now, it's an important issue to tie down because after all, it's all very well talking up the range benefits of a car with a battery 3 or 4 times the capacity of that of a conventional EV model. But you also need to remember that such a battery may also take you 3 or 4 times longer to charge. It's all very well Tesla talking about the powerful supercharging stations it's establishing around the country, at least 20 new ones each year at present, and the lesser Type 2 AC public charging points that are also pretty quick. The facts are that, relatively speaking, that these are still pretty thin on the ground and will be for a few years to come. And even if they weren't, that wouldn't help in situations where you're going to a meeting or visiting friends and rather cheekily want to plug your car in while you're there. In such circumstances where you need to use a normal 2.3 kilowatt per hour 3-pin plug, as I've needed to do on this test, a Model S can only recharge itself at a snail's pace, gaining back just 7 miles of use for every hour of charge. To fully charge the battery on that basis would take nearly 2 days. Now, to be fair to Tesla, the charging rate is the same as you'd have to put up with in every other full EV vehicle. It's just that having a larger battery inevitably means the need for a longer replenishment period. Of course, if your need is merely for local driving, you wouldn't have to be always fully recharging the thing. Even if you were on holiday and staying at a hotel, for example, plugging your Model S into a domestic 3-pin socket overnight would probably give you about 150 miles of a range, which might well be good enough. For owners charging at home or at the office, a normal single-phase electricity supply, none of these issues will of course apply. At point of ownership, they'll all invest in the kind of 7 kilowatt wall box you can get fitted by suppliers like British Gas, ChargeMaster and PodPoint for less than £100 thanks to a government grant providing for home charging. This will of course hugely improve charging times, giving you up to 30 miles for each hour of charging, with the full from empty charge time reduced to 10 hours. In other words, you should easily be able to get it done overnight. Now, if your property or place of business is able to accept a more powerful industrial strength 22 kilowatt per hour electricity 3-phase supply, then obviously your charging time could be quicker still. Out and about, as you probably know, there are various different types of charging points your Tesla sat-nav system can guide you to. Now, my town's one is a feeble 3-point affair, but hopefully close to you is a much more powerful so-called Type 2 AC charging point, where you'll be able to use the Type 2 to Type 2 connecting leads supplied with the car. Now, assuming that you've specified your car with the optional second onboard charger, you'll be able to double your rate of charging at a Type 2 point. That meaning that you'll be able to replenish your battery at the rate of up to 68 miles for every hour, with an overall empty to full battery charge time of less than 4.5 hours. Better still is the so-called CHAdeMO network of 50 kilowatt per hour DC charging stations. Find one of these, and assuming that you've the right socket attachment, in the same 30-minute period, you'll be able to get up to 85 miles of charge. Best of all is Tesla's own supercharger charging network of potent 120 kilowatt per hour chargers. These can refill half your battery in just 20 minutes and top up the whole thing from empty in only an hour and a quarter. There aren't too many of these supercharging points about at present, but Tesla is adding one somewhere in the world every working day of the year, so the network will quickly grow. Now, using these, you could conceivably plan a long road trip in your Model S. Just go to the BritishTesla.com website, click on Supercharger, and you may be surprised by just how many long trips you can plan based around short coffee stops at supercharger points that you'll be pleased to hear don't charge for the electricity you'll be drawing. Bear in mind though that you won't be able to use them in the base Model S60 variant unless you add in an enabling £1,800 upgrade to your car at the point of purchase. One final point about charging I need to make is that wherever you plug in, you'll be selecting the percentage of battery charge you want to replenish. Now, to preserve the life of the lithium-ion battery, Tesla suggests that this shouldn't exceed 80% on a regular basis. Though if you veer into the trip section of the charge screen ribbon, a full 100% charge is possible. Okay, so let's imagine your Tesla is topped up and you're about to set out on a journey. Exactly how far will it go before you grind to a halt? Well, I've already touched on the rated NEDC fuel cycle range of this 85 model. It's quoted at 310 miles, and you can add about 5 more miles to that figure if you choose the all-wheel drive dual motor version. Now, with the smaller 60 kilowatt per hour battery of the entry-level Model S60 variant, the NEDC range figure falls to 240 miles. Tesla, though, are the first to admit that the driving conditions that NEDC test figures are based upon aren't very realistic for ordinary motorists, which is why the range segment of the infotainment system will also quote the much more achievable typical range figure that will be used in the sat-nav system's journey calculation. In a Model S85 variant like the one we're trying here, if you expect this to be around 250 miles in everyday use, you probably won't be too far out. It's this typical range figure that's used for the sat-nav system calculations that'll be so crucial to the decisions owners will need to make on how and when to use this car. Now, put a destination in the GPS and it will helpfully tell you the proportion of battery charge you'll have when you reach where you're going and the proportion you'll have when you arrive back home. Once you set off, the calculations continue based on your driving style, so you'll be advised if, for example, you're cruising at too fast a speed to reach your destination on the charge available. I should finish with a word for those tired old cynics who question the eco-value of cars like this one, claiming that full EV vehicles merely move pollution upstream from relatively clean combustion engines to dirty coal-fired power stations. Now, even if you accept that argument and make the necessary calculations, eco-experts reckon that this car still achieves a wheels-to-well CO2 figure of around 85 grams per kilometre, which is pretty astonishing for something so large and fast. Perhaps a better argument to make, though, is that as an owner, you don't have to use electricity sourced from a dirty coal-fired power station. Suppliers like Ecotricity use power sourced from wind turbines and other totally natural means. What else? Well, servicing. Tesla says this car doesn't require any, given that with no engine, it has no need for things like oil and filter changes. The company does, though, recommend an annual inspection, which is really the same thing and comes as part of an £1,800 package that you can buy at point of purchase. Now, this covers you for 4 years of inspections and includes checking of things like brakes and, if necessary, replacement of items like wiper blades. Otherwise, there's not very much to go wrong, which is why you'll almost certainly never need the 4-year warranty that comes as standard. Perhaps of more relevance is the 4 years of pan-European roadside assistance that also comes included, just in case you ever get your range calculations wrong and end up by the side of the road. You might be wondering about insurance. Unfortunately, it's officially rated at a top-of-the-shop group 50, but that's mainly because the insurance companies haven't yet quite got their heads around how this Tesla security system works. Now, any Tesla store will put potential owners in touch with brokers who will give quotes based on individual circumstances, and these should be comparable with what you'd have to pay to cover other more conventional luxury saloons in this segment. As for battery longevity, well, it's true that you might experience some power loss after 10 years of use, but it won't be significant, and there's the peace of mind of an 8-year battery warranty. Now, this has a 125,000 mileage limit with the Model S60 variant, but it's infinite when it comes to the 85 models. Otherwise, the benefits just keep on coming. I've touched upon low BIK taxation, expected to be at just 5%, and you'll have no annual road tax to pay, nor will you ever have to be levied with the London congestion charge. For many browsing in the large luxury segment, all of these stats will combine to create a compelling argument. Some cars are important, others are significant, but only a very few are game-changing. This is one of those, for so many reasons. It proves America capable of world-leading automotive design. It makes luxury motoring credible in an eco-friendly world. And most significantly of all, it marks the point from which the market's perception of battery-charged cars can begin to change. In Model S terms, electric power need no longer be seen as a restrictive influence, but a liberating one. It's a design that could probably only have come from Silicon Valley, a car that could perhaps only have been developed by a company also specializing in advanced rockets and spacecraft, a brand that could certainly only have been founded by an entrepreneur who refuses to be constrained by the bounds of convention. Ultimately, this Tesla has changed so much that it's hard not to feel a bit sorry for its competitors. A conventional internal combustion engine rival suddenly has a real whiff of Betamax about it, powered by technology that's yesterday's news. Of course, that's not to suggest this car to be perfect. No one gets everything right first time. This American brand's handling and chassis tuning development still has a way to go. And less significantly, there are improvements that could be made in the cabin quality too. On top of that, the EV approach obviously isn't going to work for everyone. Even with the kind of expanded driving range you get here, those covering large daily mileages aren't going to be suited to a Model S. Most buyers in the luxury segment will be, though, and those prepared to buy into the new technology and make a few of the lifestyle changes it requires will find relatively little else to fault. These are people who realise that they won't find inspiration in the places they've already been. They understand that to move forward, you have to do something different. You have to go somewhere new. That's what Tesla has done, while the rest of the motor industry watches and hedges its bets. In doing so, they've created a car that does nothing less than rewrite the rule book.